Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ariella Morkowitz, the founding director of SVIVAH. SVIVAH is about creating a more nourishing communal faith experience for Jewish women, where we define both Jewish and women very broadly. If you want to be with us, we want you to be with us, and welcome. We love that we are multi-generational and diverse in our backgrounds, our affiliations, our lived experience, and we come together in celebration and support of women, our strengths, our unique perspectives, and the special ways that only we contribute to the world. And we learn with and from one another, discovering ways in which we, surprisingly, things that we have in common, and the ways that we differ turn out into opportunities for us to learn new sides of ourselves by reflecting back the others who happen to be in the room with us. HerTorah is a SVIVAH program directed by the fabulous Rabbi Elianna Yolkut. It's dedicated to creating a space for the diverse and wonderful group of women that we are to meet and share ideas with other humans that they may not come across organically, but joining together in a intimate and deep look at our foundational Torah texts, where our lived experience enriches and elevates the outcome. And we celebrate and are so grateful to all of our educators who build rooms and gather us around these HerTorah tables, where the diversity of who we are combined with our foundational Torah texts, the combination is unique and phenomenal, and really transformative. I want to give a thank you to those who make HerTorah possible. First, to Rabbi Elianna Yolkut, who is the visionary behind everything that is HerTorah, for your thoughtfulness and creativity in building these opportunities for us to learn with and from one another. To Yeshivat Maharat for your partnership in raising the bar for women's Torah scholarship and elevating women's Torah voices. And a big thank you to the Aviv and Covenant Foundations for your faith in HerTorah to create a unique way of learning together in community. In yesteryear, HerTorah was actually something that we did in person. So this month, HerTorah is taking a little bit of a departure from how we have done. We did move to Zoom, which brought us a really wonderful and widespread audience and community, which was so nice. And we figured out actually how to really feel connected through our Torah study, even through these ridiculous Zoom boxes. But this month of Elul seems to be bringing us the high holidays sooner than any of us had anticipated. I'm sure some of you are having last bits of summer vacation in the hectic craziness of back to school shopping or figuring out what on earth should be on your Rosh Hashanah menu. But we wanted to do something different this month so that we could still connect with everyone and bring the essence of Elul to you when it was convenient to you, and focus instead of on our community of women, focus on our educators, because they, particularly this year, have done, I don't know what kind of gymnastics to hold all of us, and have worked so hard to do so. We wanted to take a moment to lift up these incredible scholars and thinkers and educators and just ask more of them to think with us about how they are approaching this new year, and what they might be taking into this new year, so that we can be strengthened by their wisdom and each of their unique perspectives. I am hoping that you'll take a break for a second and go run over to our website, svivah.org, and sign up for our mailing list so that you don't miss a single one of these incredible interviews. Each one of them is different from the next, despite asking similar questions to all of them. And there's so much to learn from each one. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and just enjoy. These individuals are so spectacular and have so much to give, and I'm so grateful. And today, I am so thankful to be able to be here with Rabbi Elianna Yolkut. Rabbi Yolkut, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
It is so nice to have a familiar HerTorah face to come and join us. Having been an educator for us back in yesteryear, it feels so long ago.
Yeah, so long ago.
When we were actually in person.
Yeah.
But I want to give Hakarat Hatov credit where credit is due. When you came to teach for us, you taught right before a Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I remember Rabbi Elianna and I, we were sitting and thinking of trying to figure out how do we capture some of this gratitude practice? How do we anchor this Torah study a little bit stronger and make it more introspective and have people be able to really connect with each other through the, secular holiday of Thanksgiving while doing some sort of Torah learning together. And we had the chutzpah to actually really ask you to get very personal. And we asked you to teach Torah that was something that was really something that held you at a significant point in your life. And you were so gracious and shared it. But I wanted to give you credit because that experience for us was eye-opening in terms of how special and unique that is to be able to really have the audacity to ask our educators and scholars to be that vulnerable in sharing the Torah that's so meaningful to them. And that really informed this entire process of this Elul Torah learning, where we've come to all of our educators and said, what's holding you? And so I wanna just make sure to tell everybody who you are so that before I can pull your wisdom from you, I want to make sure everybody knows who you are and how to find you, because if there is an opportunity to learn with you, people should take it. Rabbi Yolkut is the rabbi in residence of lifelong learning at Congregation Addis Israel here in Washington, D.C. You are also the co-host of the podcast, Not Your Jewish Mother, which is awesome. And I love that that's been something that you've been doing. And I hope that everybody takes a minute and goes and clicks subscribe, because that is worth everything. The rest of your bio, you have so many accolades, but what it essentially encapsulates in terms of who you are and, knowing you in community and how you are in community, so much of your pulpit is about connectiveness and bringing people close, both to each other, to an understanding of their Judaism, to meaning in their Judaism. And having watched you teach now a number of times myself, I get to count myself as one of those lucky few. Everything about how you approach your leadership is about bringing people closer and bringing people in connection to one another and to their Judaism and something in themselves. And so I think for me, the idea of having you here during this month of Elul, which is so much about introspection, and simultaneously it's a process that's very isolated and very solitary and very self-centered, but it's something that we're all doing. It's something that we do as a community. I wanted to ask you today to talk about what this Elul this year is like, what this walking into a new year this year is like, particularly because I'm wondering, someone who is so much about connectiveness, both interhuman connectedness and spiritual connectedness. How are you thinking about that this year? It feels a lot harder.
Yeah, I think we can all agree. I think we can all agree that it's a lot harder. It's something that that I hate the word triggered because it sounds so bad, but something that clicked for me when you were talking actually and saying at the introduction was, Addis has an incredible introduction to Judaism program, which I'm honored to teach in every year. We have many dozens, literally, of people who want to be close to Judaism in some way, shape, or form. And last night I taught the class on the High Holidays. We teach it always right before the High Holidays. We go through all the logistics and what Rosh Hashanah is about, Yom Kippur and all that stuff. And the text I taught them last night, one of the texts I taught them last night was the second chapter of Maimonides' Hilchot Teshuvah, laws of return. And something that what struck me last night that sometimes it strikes me, but it really struck me last night was one of the essential elements that Maimonides says that we have to have in the process of seeking out forgiveness from someone is that the community has to be involved. If you go and you try to make amends with somebody and they're not receptive, what you have to do after a number of times is bring 3 friends with you so that they can bear witness to your work, your teshuvah work, essentially, which actually is, I think it's chapter 2, section 9, if I'm remembering the exact number, if you want to look it up. It's really incredible because it really actually represents something about Judaism, I think, as a whole, but certainly the process of sort of sinning or missing the mark and having to do the work of returning in Judaism, which is that there is nothing to be ashamed of. Like, there's no shame in this process that we're all in of self-introspection. Everybody has to do it, not just like people that have like consciously, intentionally erred. Like, every single person has to be a part of the process together. And I think something that the rabbis were trying to get at in this understanding of it is that it is that there is no shame in it. It is the work of being alive. Like, we are alive, and therefore we need teshuvah. This is why Rav Kook has this whole play on like teshuvah was created before the existence of the world, based on a very famous Talmudic text, which says there were certain things that were created before the rest of existence. Understanding that the divine essence, the Holy One, understood that like we were going to need this time every single year. Like, this was not something that was for people that were rich or of a certain race or of a certain gender identity or anything. Like, every single human, because of the fact that we are mortal and alive, needs teshuvah, and we need to do it in community, and we should not be embarrassed by that. Now, that is very complicated because this year, and last year obviously too, because we can't really be in community in ways that we have previously been in community. And I think one I want to say, like, I think it's important for rabbis and clergy and leaders and educators to say, like, I don't have a good answer. Like, I think there's a real loss. And so I think, like, on some level, even if you can go to shul or services, it's going to be very different than it was. Even last year, there's going to be differences from last year, and last year was different than every other year. And so I think it's okay to sit in a loss, like to be in the grief of that, because it's grieving worthy. For many of us, community is an essential element, almost more than the actual prayers. Is that, like, I know I'm going to see, you know, this Sid Schwartz is going to be sitting in the third row in the sanctuary, because that's always where he sits in this service. And we may not see that person again, because either that person may not be with us anymore, which happens every year, but is way more exacerbated this year, or because he can't come because he's immunocompromised, or because, you like, name it, like, we just can't, it's not going to be the same. And we have to be in that grief. Like, we can't move out of the grief. So I think part of what we need to accept is that there's going to be a grief aspect to the high holidays, to all the holidays. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to be in that place where it's not fully, you're not able to fully embrace the joy or even the work, because you're part of your brain and your body and your soul is taken up in your heart with the grief.
That's so hard.
Yeah, it's so hard. It is really hard. I think it's really hard. Though I have to say, I think it will be better than trying to rage against it. I think trying to rage against it will just get you angry. Whereas if you can accept it and give it a space, you might be able to, like, give it a little boundary so that you can do the other stuff, the joy, the celebration, the prayer, the self-introspection, like all of that teshuvah work. If you can, like, give it a little pocket of space in your body, in your brain, in your soul. And the other thing I think, like, that I think a lot about this particular season, but I think about it a lot in general around this time, is the Torah reading and the HerTorah for the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and in part also for the second day, but the first day is more intentionally chosen. So the first day of Rosh Hashanah, we read the story of Yitzchak's birth, of Isaac's birth, and then of the expulsion of Hagar, Abraham's maidservant, and Abraham's child Ishmael, which also then actually the chapter, that's what everybody always wants to talk about, but the chapter actually isn't done then. Like, what happens is that Hagar is also going to get a blessing from God, and then Abraham also has an encounter with Abimelech, with one of the kings that is surrounding the area. And then we have the story in the HerTorah of Hannah, who is unable to conceive a child, and prays for a child and has a child. And there's this whole incredible interaction with the priest in that passage. And then the second day is the Akedah, is the binding of Isaac. I mean, I think there's a lot of things I could say here about why are these chosen? Why are these specific passages chosen? But right now, what I'm sitting with is the notion of longing and the pain of longing every character seems to me to be longing for something. So Abraham and Sarai are, of course, are longing for a child, right? They get what they long for. And then there's this terrible story, in my opinion, in where they like just dismiss a part of their family. And then Hagar is, of course, longing to be a part of a family and to save her child who's gonna thirst to death. She's like watching him thirst to death. So she is longing for something. And Hannah, of course, is longing for a child, and then essentially gives her child over to God as like in service of this gift that she got. We don't have it articulated in the same way, but one must imagine that when God says to Abraham, like, go and bind your child on an altar, Abraham must have longed that this wasn't the test that he was going to be given by God. And Yitzchak, we don't get almost any voice from at all, the longing of like wanting to be loved. And they're tied together actually by like a kind of famous, or at least famous in nerdy rabbinic circles, midrash, which is that, so when I'm going to combine this all together so it makes sense. When Abraham takes Isaac up, God stays his hand and says, no, don't do it. Like, I just wanted to see if you would. I would never ask you to do that. And when the text tells us that Abraham comes down alone. Yitzchak doesn't come down with him. It's in the singular. That, of course, like triggers like shiny lights for the rabbis. They're like, wait a minute, where's Isaac? And there's a lot of midrashim around this, like trying to understand what happened to Isaac. Yeah. One of the midrashim says, and Avraham and Isaac never talk again in the Torah. That's the end of their relationship, understandably so. So Isaac comes down, and one midrash says, what does he go do? He goes to get Hagar, and he brings her back home. And that midrash says that the woman Keturah, who Abraham later marries after Sarah dies, is actually Hagar. Wow. Because Yitzchak understood about the longing that Hagar had, and he was able to empathize in a way that he hadn't been able to before once he was on the altar, because he realized what it meant to long for the family that you didn't have but you wanted so badly. Yeah. And I think this is like the nature of this season, right? Hayom Harat Olam, we say it over and over again. Today is, and I really think we should translate it this way. I think most translations are bad. Today, this day, Rosh Hashanah, it's pregnant with possibility. But in possibility is a deep longing for lives that we aren't living, like a deep desire for the things that are missing for us, or even sometimes the things we chose not to have because we chose a different path. And just to speak to your original question, like we are all longing for something. Yeah. For some of us, it's the pandemic. For some of us, it's the fear around about the climate crisis, and like longing for a world that is not so devastated already by the climate crisis. For some of us, it's economic security because we've been devastated by the last 18 months. For some of us, it's looking at a world that's filled with racial injustice and inequality, where Black men are being killed by the police. There's like, I could keep going, right? Each of these characters in our lives, including us, is if someone is like, we just want to go back to shul, we want to be like in services, and we want to go to kiddush after services with people, and want to eat food and schmooze and do all that stuff, right? We're all longing. What we honor on Rosh Hashanah is that we are longing for a better version of the life that we're living. And I think that intersection at the Torah reading is really there to like harness that for us. And to say, Hayom Harat Olam, today is the moment where you're allowed to have faith that this world and this life is pregnant with possibility. It doesn't actually have to be how it is right now. We actually can do things to change it. And ultimately, I think that's what faith is in Judaism, like, because this is why we have so many different theologies, because faith isn't really about what exactly you believe about God. It's belief in this single line, Hayom Harat Olam. I believe that this very day that God imbued my life into, has a possibility to be different than yesterday, and tomorrow will be different. And that shouldn't be scary. That should give us a sense of anchoring, that things can fundamentally change. We can long to be like Isaac and like bring Hagar back in, bring back in what we know people need, bring us back to our communities, back to families. And I'm trying to hold that this year, because I think that it helps me to think about that. Not that it gets rid of my grief or sadness or anger or frustration or all the things I think many of us are feeling. And not because there's an immediate change, but because when you're on the altar and you see the life that you wanted to live and it's not what you're living, you could come out of that change, not necessarily for the worse, but for the better. You could come out of it like reaching your hand out to the life that you really truly desire. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's where I'm at.
It makes a lot of profound sense. I think you're tapping into the idea of looking forward is overwhelming, because making choices about the future and how to affect that change to actualize on that possibility, that world that you'd like to be living in instead of the one that you're inhabiting right now, it just stops me. The idea, like, where do I go? But the idea of like Yitzchak doing something that was not, he did not end up creating the world that he wanted for himself perfectly, but he did something.
Yeah.
Hannah did something.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I need to hold on to, because it's overwhelming to think of like, how do I create the world that I would rather be in right now?
Yeah. By the way, there's one other character you can look to on Yom Kippur, who's, I think, the greatest hero of the whole kit and caboodle, if that's still a word that people use. I'm going to date myself, which is Jonah, who is just the greatest. I mean, it's just the greatest book of the Tanakh. It's so fantastic in so many ways. But one of the things that's great about it is, so he's like you. He's like, I don't want to be involved in this change the world thing. Like, go away from me. Like, God, I'm not going to Nineveh. Like, you're crazy person. Like, look at all these other prophets. By the way, every other prophet, he was right. Nobody listened to them. Yeah. That's because they were going to the Jewish community. He got to go to the non-Jewish community. They actually listened to him. That's one of the great things about the book. But another great thing is when he's on the ship and the captain of the ship is like, Lama, you're down. Like, what are you down there sleeping for? Like, the world is falling apart, which is how we all feel, right? We all feel like Jonah. Like, I want to just go to sleep. I want to get in my bed. Like, yes. Leave me alone. I don't want to cook Rosh Hashanah dinner, even though I do have some good menu ideas. He says to him, "Who are you?" And Jonah says, "Ivri Anochi," which is a very strange label. I am a Hebrew. Nobody in the Tanakh calls themselves a Hebrew. Everybody calls themselves, I'm an Israelite, I'm from Bnei Israel, I'm Yisrael, I'm like that. That's just not a word that gets used very often in the biblical. Mm-hmm. And I love it because it's like, it's got a double entendre. Ivri could be Avaryan, somebody who is a transgressor. That's what we say on Kol Nidre night, right? We're allowed to pray with the transgressors, same Hebrew root. But it's also a boundary crosser. It's also someone who's willing to go across a border, someone who's willing to see the possibility of something different over the line. And I love it that the rabbis imagine that. It's not in the Torah that Yitzchak did that. It's that the rabbi said, you know what? Even though we think Avraham passed the test, like that trauma actually had long impact. And the long impact was that Yitzchak became a boundary crosser. He was an Ivri. He was a true Ivri. Why? Because he did something from the trauma. The trauma didn't stick with him and paralyze him forever. He went and found Hagar, who had suffered a trauma too, because Abraham, who I think she probably loved very much, sent her and her child out to die. And she got brought back in. That's because of Yitzchak. So, and I think eventually Jonah also becomes this. He accepts himself as somebody who can cross borders and cross boundaries, even though God has to school him all the way until the end. This is the funniest God character that we have, I think, in the Tanakh. It's a very humorous book in many ways, with deep meaning. But to be a boundary crosser in Judaism can be a bad thing. That's the like avaryanim, when we cross boundaries in a way that's unsafe for someone else. But there's also a different kind of boundary crosser that in times of trauma or in times of trouble or in times of narrowness, they're the wideners, right? Where we need God to widen our road, we also need each other to widen our road. We need to find a way to light the path, to broaden the path for people. And that might, in fact, be a way for all of us to get out of the place where the grief, the anxiety, the fear, all the things that we're feeling is paralyzing us. And I'm with you in it. Like, I'm not there yet. but that's where I'm trying to get to. Like, I'm trying to be like Yitzchak, even though Yitzchak is a character I never related to before this year, never. Like, I would have said he was the most impotent, but this midrash reminded me that there's actually a way to read him differently. And that's what I'm holding on to, which is like, we're all Ivrim, like we're all Hebrews. That's what we are this year. We're not Bnei Israel this year, because we can't be together like Bnei Israel gets to be together, not safely. So we get to be Ivrim. Ivrim is something different. Ivrim is people that can cross boundaries to bring other people, to help other people, to bring other people back from trauma. And I want to be that. That's how I want to be in the world, as a rabbi, as a person, as a mom, as a spouse. I want to be an Ivriya, like, for the sake of God. So that's the added point to your comment of exhaustion and paralysis, which I'm with you on.
But I love that you brought it so full circle, that it's still a communal act. The idea of being that boundary crosser is something that we do not in a self-serving manner, but in something, it's carving out room and carving out space and charting a path for others to follow and join. Especially in a time that feels so lonely. I thank you. Thank you. Do you have, it was chutzpahdik of us to ask you then, and I'll be more chutzpahdik and ask you now. What is the Torah that you're taking into the new year? What is something that that you would want to give us to hold us into the new year? You're such an evocative writer always, where you frame so much of, first of all, you share so much of your experience of how you're experiencing the world. And you do it with such a beautiful Jewish and Torah lens constantly. I love your writing. And I'd love to take selfishly some of that with me into this new year.
Can I share a poem? It's not my usual mode, but I have a poem that I've been holding. I taught it to some people at Addis and some other places I've been teaching in advance of High Holidays, and I really can't get out of my mind. Do you know the poet, Zichronah Livracha, Adrienne Rich? Have you heard of Adrienne Rich? So she's amazing. First of all, I like to elevate women's voices, so it's good to elevate women's voices. Not that there aren't Jewish women's voices, but this is a Torah text. Like, I see this text as a Torah text. So I'm going to share it with you, because I have it printed out next to my bed, because I think for me, it's a deeply High Holiday text. Wow. So I'm going to read it to you. It's called Prospective Immigrants, Please Note. That's the title of the text. Either you will go through the door, or you will not go through. If you go through, there is always the risk of remembering your name. Things look at you doubly, and you must look back and let them happen. If you do not go through, it is possible to live worthily, to maintain your attitudes, to hold your position, to die bravely, but much will blind you, much will evade you. At what cost? Who knows? The door itself makes no promises. It is only a door. Now, she's amazing. Like, her work is really incredible, in lots of different ways, but I love this image of the door. Yeah. I can't stop thinking about it, that like the High Holidays is all about like this question of like, do you want, and I like feel like I could cry just thinking about it. Like, are you going to walk through the door in your life? Like, are you going to walk into the room that you need to be in this year? Which I think is essentially like what Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur ask us to do. Yes. Like, can you be brave in that way? You could stay here. I said to the few I taught this to, it reminds me of, there's this famous text on the Talmud about Shalom Bayit, about peace in the house. It says, there's a commentary on it. It basically says, like, you could either be right or you could have peace in your home. And I think of it in this way, like, you could die bravely, she says. You could just stay where you're at, you know? You could just put down your stake and stay exactly how you are in your life now. Or you could choose to walk through the door. There's no guarantee. It's risky. This work, this High Holiday work, Cheshbon HaNefesh, accounting of our souls, it's risky work. Like, you can cross over and into the door on the other side, and like, it could be really complicated and hard for a very long time in individual relationships, in families, in synagogues, in community, like in all ways, it could be very challenging. But the possibility in the risk is tremendous. It's the tradition believes that we can walk through the door and we can change our entire existence, our entire sense of self, our entire sense of how we walk in the world. And I really love that. And I think like the double piece for me this year is like immigrants, like the notion of immigrant as sacred. Like when you have that is such a gift. The people that do this work, whether it's literally boundary crossing, literally leaving a country and going somewhere else, or if you're walking through the door of teshuvah, walking through the work of this month, what you can give is what we get from people who do this is beyond. It's incredibly holy and sacred. And I think it's also like on a political level, I'll just say I'm not very political, but like it's the truth of it. Like what we are, when we have that kind of orientation towards the world, the immigrant orientation, it can really make a difference, beyond what we can see with our eyes. And so I'm holding her text with me. I'm going to take it. I'm going to stick it in my machzor, which is why I printed it out. Wherever I end up praying, whenever I end up getting to pray. I have 3 small children, so it's unlikely that I'll get a lot of davening in. And I'm going to keep looking at it because I'm going to keep reminding myself that I could have the courage to walk through the door.
I'm going to print it out and put it in my machzor and when I pretend to daven too. Because I love how this imagery for me is so powerful, so resonant. The idea of this pregnant with possibility that is a constant trope of the day, and now the imagery of this door, of that tension of like what that moment is of walking through, that is possibility, that door is possibility. And it's such a real image for me. And it so captures like this betwixt and between. I feel like it's not even like, I actually appreciate that you took us back a step. We're not at a threshold yet, even. We have to decide to push the door open.
Yeah.
And it's a privilege to be able to stand at the door and just finding what it is in ourselves that lets us walk through. Thank you. Wow.
Can I just say one more thing that I feel like needs to be said more to people, whoever listens to this, and to you, maybe you need to hear this.
Yes.
There's this text about the shofar, and it talks about how the shofar sound is there's a sound underneath in this world, and then there's a sound, an elyon sound, an upstairs sound, and they don't mean that literally, they mean that spiritually, the rabbis. And it talks about moving, what the shofar does is it moves us from kisei hadin to kisei harachamim, from the seat of judgment to the seat of compassion. So I want to say to you and to everybody else, this is the year for compassion to yourself and to the people around you. Like, you have to use this time, even if all you do is hear the shofar one time. You can't get to services, it's too hard for you, you can't even get out of your house. If you can just hear the shofar one time and use the sound of the shofar to seat yourself in compassion instead of in deen, instead of in judgment, specifically about yourself, because it's so easy. And I think particularly for women, this is a challenge. We are so judgmental of ourselves and others, but especially of ourselves. And so I want to this has nothing to do with what I said before, but the shofar, the blast of the shofar is simply a sound to move us from the tachton to the elyon, from the low world to the upper world. And in the upper world, it's the seat of compassion this month. It's not the seat of deen. That's where God is moving. We're moving God from that place. So compassion. Like, if all you can do is eat an apple with honey on Rosh Hashanah, that's it. You did it. Good job. You succeeded. And I'm right there with you. And I'm a rabbi. So if I'm there with you, then you're in good company, I feel like. So
thank you. I am literally in tears thinking about that, and I will never listen to the shofar the same again.
I actually don't know the source offhand, but I do know it's there for sure, and I can send it to you so you have it in front of you.
My God, Rabbi Yolkut, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for interviewing me. It's so nice to just talk kind of, in a relaxed way and not teach in front of a classroom. So it's nice to have a different venue.
This is the best Elul. I'm the luckiest human on earth. I got to hang.
You don't need to go to shul at all. You've gotten 100 sermons. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to wish you and your gorgeous family a Shana Tova. It should be sweet. It should be successful. It should be healthy. It should be nourishing.
Amen. Thank you.
It should brim with possibility.
Thank you.
And to everybody who's listening, thank you for coming and learning with this amazing Rabbi Yolkut. Please go find her, go listen to her podcast and get a bit of her in an easy way, and then go find her classes and learn with her in all the other ways that you can. Again, go to our website, SVIVAH.org. You can find all of our educators and don't just take advantage of them this amazing month, but go seek them out this entire year through. They are phenomenal, and they will continue doing the ridiculously hard work of holding all of us up. Shana Tova to everyone. Thank you so much.
Shana Tova.